Okay. Good morning again. I set up this microphone over here because usually I have on a lavalier, so I might want to move from mic to mic. So I just said I'd put one over here just in case. All right. Let us say a word of prayer right quick. Lord Father, God, you know that I've been studying this thing for months. It didn't start out like this, but it's here now. So be with me in this sermon, Father. Speak through me and give me the boldness and the courage to say what needs to be said. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Originally, this sermon was supposed to be church opening. That was the name of the sermon in the beginning. Remember, we were supposed to open up in July, and because things was down, but then everything blew up. So I had a little 10-slide thing. The pastor wanted me to do a 10-slide presentation on church opening and stuff like that. Well, it changed until, for some reason, the Lord turned it into a sermon, I guess, because I really wanted to preach. I had a sermon called Sunday's Coming Part 2, and I was ready for that one, man. And then this one and another one came, and I'm like, wow. So we're going to talk about this today, church defiance. We know that since this pandemic started, things have been going haywire. I mean, we've seen the best of people. We've seen the worst of people. Some people, this thing haven't moved at all. But we've seen a lot of rebellion and defiance. So that's what we're going to talk about today, rebellion and defiance. Okay? And well, let's go to the slides. Oops. Okay. After things got out of hand, the governments of the world, hey, they was like, okay, we need to lock down. And they started locking down, and of course, people rose up against it. I remember watching the news, and they were doing all kinds of things. Then they wanted to social distance. Governments like social distance coming from the health experts. Hey, let's social distance, and people rebelled against that. Okay, and we know on the lockdown it worked because it worked in Wuhan, it worked in Italy, it worked in New York, but some people are just defiant. All right, and then the big one is the mask. All right, that's the big one going now. People are actually getting shot around the world for wearing masks. Okay? So we see that the world is being defiant. And I understand that. The world is the world. We should expect this, It's in some of their bloods. So a lot of them don't know Christ. They haven't, some of them have never been to church. So they feel that the governments are coming down on them too hard. All right? But the problem comes when the church start getting defiant. So the question is, we know that the governments are over the world, but are the governments supposed to be over the church as well? I mean, are we supposed to listen to the government? Are we supposed to take advice from them? All right? First, let's establish what God said in Daniel 2. He said, and he changeth the times and the season. He removeth the kings and set up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. And the next one, Proverbs 8:15 and 16. By me kings reign, and princes decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. So right here, this is telling you, God sets up kings and he takes them down. He sets up governments and he takes them down. Now, I don't know when the first government happened, but I'm thinking maybe around Nimrod Day, because that's when the first cities started being built and governments started appearing. All right? No matter how wicked or how righteous, God set them up. And we're gonna understand it as we go. But did God mean for the governments to rule over the church? Because we know when God came, when God brought Israel out of Egypt, right? He said, I'm your king. And God let them out and let them in the wilderness and showed them miracles and all this stuff like that. But something happened, okay, to take us from under the theocracy of God. It says, oops, I'm sorry, I went too fast. This thing is working too fast. Okay. 1 Samuel 8, 1-3-4. And it came to pass when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. And we know the story. And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, which is dirty money or dishonest money, took bribes and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. And brothers and sisters, this is why today the church is under the government. From this decree right here that happened thousands of years ago, when we said we didn't want a king, we didn't want God to be our king, we wanted a king. And then they validated that when they said we serve no king but Caesar when Jesus was being crucified. So he was rejected twice. So we're reaping the benefits of what happened back then. All right? That's why God's people now is under government. Sister White said that if Israel would have stayed faithful, he would have reigned over us forever. I don't know how that would have worked out, but he would have been over his people. But we rejected him. Let's see what Sister White got to say about this. And it's interesting. When his people first wanted a king, he was exceedingly displeased, because it was a declaration that they no longer desired him as their theocratic governor. Nevertheless, in accordance with their wishes, he gave them a king, just as in accordance with our wishes, he gives us a president. So we're moving up to our day. In other words, he ordains that no nation can exist without an authoritative head. Whether that head shall be emperor or king, president, or democratic judge, he leaves to the particular nations to determine for itself. Therefore, vox populi, which is Greek for the voice of the people, in choosing magistrates become vox dei, which means the voice of God. And the duty of the citizens immediately follow to show the magistrates respect, reverence, and obedience. To resist the magistrate and to break the law is to resist the power of God. So God is establishing things right now. He said, if you break the laws, you're still breaking my laws. All right? See, there's a fine line that's been swept away that we're going to talk about that other churches are saying, and pretty much it's we ought to obey God rather than man. That's the cry of the Lamb right now. We ought to obey God rather than man. We ought to obey God rather than man. Thank you. All right? As a matter of fact, last week, the pastor last week, there's a gentleman that came to the church, and I know him, and my wife answered opened the door, and he wanted to come in without a mask. And so Donette said, well, he can't come in. He was like, oh, so I see y'all serving man rather than God too. And he left. Then this week, one of my friends called me and told me the same thing. Because I was praying whether I should preach this sermon, because I wanted to preach the other one so bad, okay? But I asked God last week, if this is the one, let me know. And those who are like, okay, this is the one, okay? So it's saying to resist the magistrates and to break the law is to resist the power of God. Continuing, the Bible says in Matthew 22:21, render therefore unto the Caesar the things which are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God. Within the sphere of civil relations, Caesar is supreme. Within the sphere of moral and religious duty, God alone is supreme. And here's the key. Civil governments have to do with the relations of man with man, but they have nothing whatever to do with the duties that grow out of man's relation to God. So civil duty is man to man. And then there's a duty man to God. It's a difference. But like I said, the line has been skewed, and we're going to see what exactly happened. It's been skewed where everybody just yelling and screaming, and I'm like, well, that's not true, because as I'm going to show you, it's plain in the Bible what we should be doing. Now, was there rebellion back then? I look for examples of back then of when there was rebellion against a heathen nation. And this man comes to mind. I, I could have picked several ones, but Zedekiah, his story just intrigued me. You know, God said that y'all are going into bondage. Okay? Now, before that, God was merciful. When they asked for a king, God had kings come up from within them, Israel and Judah. But they kept sinning and rebellion. So God said, okay, I'm going to put you under heathen kings now. I'm going to put you under heathen governments. All right? Now, before Zedekiah, there was Jehoiachin and Jehoiachim, and there was Jehoahaz. There was a bunch of Jehovahs. And, you know, when Nebuchadnezzar came down and started taking Jerusalem, he left them in charge. But as they rebelled against his government, which God said, listen, he took them back to Babylon. And then another one came, took them to Babylon. So Zedekiah comes on the scene, all right? And this is what it says in 2 Kings 24, 17 and 19. And the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, made Mattaniah, his father's brother, king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done as his brother. And he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God. But he stiff-necked and hardened his heart from turning into the Lord God of Israel. Nebuchadnezzar put him in charge, and he rebelled. All right? But then God, which we're going to read next, sent Jeremiah and warned him again. And he still rebelled. And here we go. Jeremiah had followed a consistent course in counsel and submission to the Babylonians. So Jeremiah was talking to the other kings as well. Hey, God said you're going into bondage. Go. Okay? Don't worry about the government is wicked or righteous. You're going under the government. But he said, I will take care of you, which we're going to read later. And it says, ambassadors from Edom, Moab, Tyre, and other nations visited Zedekiah to learn whether he would join them in a united revolt against Babylon. So now they decide to get together. They're going against God. They're going against Nebuchadnezzar. They're going against Jeremiah for a revolt against the government of Nebuchadnezzar. And they putting this coalition together, okay? He said, Judah's king rebelled against the prophets, against his benefactor, and against his God. In his own wisdom, he turned to the ancient enemy of Israel, sending his ambassadors even into Egypt, that they might give him horses and much people. So not only did he use Ammonites and the Edomites and Tyre, he went down to Egypt to get horses and people there. They was coming for this revolt against God's word, rebellion, being defiant against what God set up. His government right then he was going to use was the Babylonian government. Okay? But now, Jeremiah, God talks to Jeremiah and sends Jeremiah to them. And he says, thus saith the Lord to me, make thee bonds and yokes and put them upon thy neck and send them to the kingdom of Edom and to the king of Moab and to the king of the Ammonites and to the king of Tyre and to the king of Zidon by the hand of the messengers which come to Jerusalem unto Zedekiah the king of Judea. This was a warning. Hey, come on. You're going into Babylonian captivity, okay? For some reason, God's people back then thought that nothing could happen to them. That God's people, God was over just God's people in Jerusalem, and anybody else around them was evil. And that's not true. We just read, God sets up all kings. Still warning. And all the nations shall serve him, and his son, until every time of his land come. And in many nations great kings shall serve themselves of him. And it shall come to pass that the nation and kingdom which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that the nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword, and with the famine, and with pestilence, until I have consumed them by his hand. So God is getting serious. He said, listen, this is your last chance. What are you going to do? So what do you think Zedekiah did? Okay. Therefore, God brought upon them the kings of the Chaldees, because they rebelled. Again, he didn't do it. Who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary. This is the consequences of rebellion, defiant. all right, slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young men or maiden or man or him that stooped for age. He gave them all into his hand. And all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. And they burnt the house of God, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire, and destroyed all the godly vessels thereof. Then they took the king, and carried him unto the king of Babylon to Riblah, in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment unto him. And the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He slew also the princes of Judah in Riblah. Then he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon found him in chains, and carried him to Babylon to put him in prison till the day of his death. That was a tragic story. All right? He was warned. All right? God set up a government for him to work under. And you'll know, if you read the chapter before, he told everyone that was going to Babylon that I will take care of you. If you stay in Jerusalem, you will die. Okay? But you now are going to be serving heathen governments. All right? But they still rebelled. All right? Because they perhaps were saying in their mind, we ought to obey God rather than man. But they didn't know God was working through Nebuchadnezzar, because God called Nebuchadnezzar his servant. And we all know in the end, Nebuchadnezzar was saved. All right? So now we're going to move today. That was an example of rebellion. It's just not happening now. It happened back then. All right? So what are we as Christians supposed to do? All right? What does it mean when it says we must obey God rather than man? And that's the rally cry going on right now. Every time I was doing this study, we ought to obey God rather than man. All right? This is the main guy he's the main culprit right now. There's other ones we're going to look at, all right? And we're not talking about the person. We're talking about what they did, their system, what they're doing. This is John MacArthur. He has 8,000 people in his church. He lived in California. He defied orders to close, and he said, we must obey God rather than men. Then he added, California pastor John MacArthur said in a sermon Sunday, his church will continue to meet in person despite a state-mandated ban on such gatherings, saying that Christ, not the state, is the head of the church. Okay, and we know that's not true. We just read where Christ is the head of the state and the church. He sets up all kings and governments, and we are to submit to the government. We just read that. So I don't know what they're reading. I really don't. And we're going to read something in the Bible that's going to show it even plainer than this. So what does it mean to obey God rather than men? We got to put the line back in the sand that they're missing. Review and Herald says, men may make laws to enforce Sunday observance, but they have no spiritual authority for doing. Have no scriptural authority for doing. We cannot do otherwise than obey the law of Jehovah, irrespective of any conflicting law enacted by man. When man-made laws are contrary to God's sacred enactments, which is his laws, we must choose to obey God rather than man, while respecting earthly authorities insofar as they do not interfere with our allegiance to God. We are ever to acknowledge our divine ruler as the supreme authority. So it's saying right there, if man's laws conflict with the laws of God, all right, that's the line in the sand. If it conflicts with the laws of God, then we ought to obey God. But if it does not conflict with the laws of God, we ought to obey man no matter how bad it looks. Okay? Just like what happened in Babylon. No matter how bad it looked, God said, I set up the government, I put them in place. And when they were before the council, the high priest asked, did not we straightly command you that you should not teach in his name? Then the apostles answered, we ought to obey God rather than man. This is even clearing up even more. We ought to be obedient to all the laws of our country, except when those laws come in collision with the law of God. And then we must obey God in respect of everything else. So if the government is saying, hey, do this, we should do it. Okay, and I'm going to show you what rebellion will do if we don't. Okay, and it's that simple. But what they're doing, they're missing the part where they don't understand, actually, that how important the law of God is going to play in the end time. They just going on their relationship with Christ, which I understand, which we need a relationship with Christ. But the laws of God can't be denied. To show me your relationship with Christ, you keep the laws of God. And some of them are doing unbeknownst to them, and I understand that. All right? But that's the line. As a matter of fact, Revelation 13:15 says, and he had powers to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. To speak and cause means to legislate and enforce. All right? Let me give you an example. 2015, the same-sex marriage law passed. All right? So America, which is the image of the beast, was speaking as a dragon because a nation speaks through their laws. So it was spoken, but it wasn't enforced. So we are still to keep the laws of the land because we're not forced to do that. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? It's a forced thing. That's what the Bible said, that God's going to come out of his hiding place when his laws are voided. When it becomes law legislated and enforced to force people to do it, then that's when you act. But in the meantime, we are to listen to the government. Let's go to the Bible. Romans 13:1-2. It says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Now, I could have put this in the beginning of the sermon, and if we are a school, world-versed Christian who trusts God with all our heart, we shouldn't have to go no farther than that. That right there showed me, okay, if I believe that, I trust God. All right? But unfortunately, we have to go and explain things, and I understand that. But it said there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities have existed. And by the way, as I'm doing my study, I'm going to listen to pastors. None of them are bringing up these texts. And I'm sitting there bewildered. I'm like, okay, because I want to see what they say, how are they interpreting these texts that I'm reading. And none of them are bringing this up. And I have a theory, which we'll get to. Okay? Second verse. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against God. Authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Those who rebel against the governments of the earth will bring judgment on themselves. That's what it says, right? It's plain as day. It's plain. How? All right, I'm going to show you some articles, and we're going to go on. Churches were eager to reopen. Now they are confronting corona cases. All right? It started happening about May, and it's just been skyrocketing. Okay, here's the article. Weeks after President Trump demanded that America shuttered houses of worship to be allowed to reopen, new outbreaks of the coronavirus are surging through the churches across countries where services have resumed. We're talking about bringing judgments on yourself by disobeying God. The virus has infiltrated Sunday sermons, meetings of ministers, Christian youth camps in Colorado and Missouri. It has struck churches that defied lockdowns and refused to heed new limits on numbers of worshipers. Pastors and their families have tested positive, as have church ushers, front door greeters, and hundreds of churchgoers. In Texas, about 50 people contracted the virus after a pastor told congregants they could once again hug one another. More than 650 coronavirus cases have been linked to nearly 40 churches and religious events across the United States. This is in defiance of God. God's church should not be a part of this. And if you tell me that God is a part of this movement, then I think you're mistaken. Okay? They're going against what God set up. And I can't emphasize that more. It's plain. We just read it. Okay? More. Here go more. Just a few more. Person who have COVID-19 positive attended a church service and exposed 180 people. And this is a few of hundreds that I was going through. I had to pick out which one I want. One church large coronavirus outbreak was traced back to a pastor and his wife who attended the service before they developed symptoms. Okay, all of these, like we talked about, it bringing judgment, just like verse 2 said. You bring judgment on yourself. COVID-19 spread silently through a rural Arkansas church in March, and it says 35 of 92 parishes, I believe, were infected. 2 southern churches forced to be closed after leaders congregate get coronavirus. And this one is a tragedy. This pastor, as he's preaching, he kept saying, this is what he said, keep preaching. He's going to keep preaching unless I'm in jail or in the hospital. But guess what? He died. Defiant, pastor in Virginia. They said close down because the infection is going to spread. No. And he lost his life, and his family was infected. And that's tragic. Despite authorities urging people to practice social distancing, Glenn held an in-person service on March 22nd, and that doomed him. Defiance of God. Defiance of what he set up. 100 people in Ohio were infected with coronavirus as a man attended church. And this one, I just got this week. I'm just going over stuff, all right? Georgia reports 49 church-related COVID-19 outbreaks. These are outbreaks that happen in Georgia from churches. Now, what I'm saying is that we know that outbreaks happen in Walmart and stuff like that around the country. We understand that. But we as church people know better. We see this stuff happening. We should have the common sense to say, okay, we see that. We need to do what God is telling us through the government. Now, I understand something that the government says is kind of wacky, okay, if I can use the word wacky, okay? But there's federal government, then there's state government, then there's county government, and then there's city government, okay? If you got to go down to the city government, listen, and then we also have a church government that we listen to as well, all right? And luckily, our church government is on the right track, at least the Florida Conference, all right? So these outbreaks are happening. Judgment on yourself. All right, judgment on yourself. Not only was it churches, all of these are Christian camps this summer. Missouri, 82 kids. Arkansas, summer program amped up social distancing after a whole bunch of them. I thought I had it down there, caught it. St. Pete's summer camp temporarily closed after campus test positive for coronavirus. All these are Christian. I'm staying Christian. Now this one is amazing. Campus test positive for COVID-19 after attending evangelical youth camp in Texas. And this is a real picture. This is them praising God, no distancing, no mask, no nothing. 300 youth. Lo and behold, it was a breakout. All right? The parents are now furious with the church. And I'm like, okay. Then 2 days later, this comes out. Texas church blames parents. So there's a civil war happening in the church because the parents are blaming the church and the church is blaming the parent. And one of the instructors for the camp said, I didn't force you to send her. That was to one of the parents. He didn't force them. So you see now, I just showed you that there's death of pastors, people are getting sick, civil wars in churches, church closings. And this should open up our eyes, or to at least some people like, okay, you know what, maybe we're going down the wrong path. Because I've heard and seen, around the country, and I talked to my brother and my sisters, that Adventists start getting caught up in this. And we shouldn't, all right? God is over the government, and we need to adhere to what God is telling us. I'll show you a text on that. All right, so we bring judgment on ourselves. You saw what just happened. They brought it themselves. Let's go to Romans 13, 3 and 4. That was 1 and 2. And it says, for rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from the fear of one in authority? Then do what is right and you will be commended. If the authority tell you to do something, do it and they'll leave you alone. That's what it's saying, right? Okay, let's go to verse 4. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. Y'all hearing this? But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoers. And when I read this, I'm like, is anybody else reading this? All right? So here it's saying, okay, in verse 1 and 2 it said you bring judgment on yourself. In 3 and 4 it said, or the authorities are going to come after you. Okay? Is that happening? That same guy, John MacArthur, that we talked about in the beginning. John MacArthur could face fines, be arrested for holding in-person church services amid COVID thing. So the state said, hey, we're thinking about pressing charges, all right? Because you're not being your brother's keeper, by the way, which the Bible speaks of. A person loyal to President Trump has been retained by high-profile Pastor John MacArthur and his Grace Community Church in a COVID-19 fight with California Governor Gavin Newsom and the city of Los Angeles. Grace Community Church has defied government health mandates that prohibits large gatherings to prevent the spread of the deadly virus and now faces a $1,000 per day fine by the city of Los Angeles and possible arrest of MacArthur. You see? You see the authorities coming down, all right? So now he comes back arrogantly. California targeted the wrong groups. John MacArthur sues the state over worship service. So now he retaliates and go and sue them. So now there's a fight back and forth, all right? He said, they just want us to shut us down. John MacArthur Church defies court and meets. This was last week. Week before last, they was warned. Last week, they met, okay? This is what he said. We're not meeting because we want to be rebellious. We're meeting because this is what our Lord commanded us to do. MacArthur commanded that those gathered in the sanctuary, he said, you're here, you're not distancing, you're not wearing masks, and it's all good news that you're not outside. Because the city said that you can worship, but if you worship outside, then you still have to do things, but you can worship outside. They said no. Then he said, the Lord knew you needed to be inside and unmasked. Isn't that something? Pure defiance. And then he got the nerve to say they're not being rebellious, but then they're going against what the city asked them to do. Okay? And like I said, I'm not taking up from for the city. I'm just reading what God said and what we're supposed to do. All right? This is God's government. And look at this. This week, LA mayor threatens to shut off electricity, water to the churches that meet. And it's in reference to the MacArthur. Eric Mayor Garcett, older, came the same week that Pastor John MacArthur of Grace Community Church in Los Angeles conducted several interviews and said his congregation would not obey a statewide order to stop meeting. So guess what? The saga continues because tomorrow we're going to find out what happens. But the whole point is that they're in a fight with Big Brother. And eventually they're going to lose. Okay? Because it's already been approved by the city to cut off their water and their electricity. So how much, as a church do we have to defy God? A bunch of Zedekiahs. Won't listen to the prophets, won't listen to God, won't listen to the government, which God sets up. He sets these things up. All right? Here goes another one. Florida mega pastor arrested for holding crowded church service. He has 4,000 members. Defiant Louisiana pastor arrested over corona. This is the government coming against them. Remember that we just read? They come against you. And he said, before his congregation caught it, God gave you an immune system. That's what he told him. Why are you doing this? God gave you an immune system to fight all of this. So in other words, let's just eat anything we want. Let's just drink anything we want because our immune system will take care of it. No, our immune system works with our health message. Okay? Health and immune goes together. That's why a lot of people today are suffering and have to be on ventilators because their health wasn't up to par. So when this disease got into them, it's killing their lungs. Sister White said, I didn't have the quote, she said that when a pandemic hits, she said pestilence. When a pestilence hits, God's people should turn to the health message. Okay? And that's what we need to do. All right? Not to your immune system, but to the health message. And if you heed the health message, your immune system will help fight these diseases off. And this one is tragic. This is one of the first one. Defiant. They told him not to have worship. He has 230,000 members. And in 230,000 members, 5,000 members caught it in defiance. They came to him and said, please don't. No, he did it. His name is Lee Man He. 230 members, 5,000 people infected, which in the end resulted in 30% of the nation's infectious numbers from one church. all right? And what's happening now? I read it. Well, actually, I got it right here. I added it last night. This was in March. August 1st, he was charged and arrested with murder. And then guess what? When they charged him with murder, they found out that he was doing other things. So he destroyed evidence and embezzlement. And he's waiting trial. And this is really him right here, kneeling, asking for forgiveness from the government. All right? But it's too late. And hundreds of people died too, by the way. I thought I had it in there. Pasadena threatens church member with 1 year of jail attending indoor worship. And this is what's going on. All right? The city of Pasadena, California is threatening a local church with fines, jail, and even closure for violating government restrictions prohibiting indoor worshipers. This is the authorities coming after you. All right? Last week, Pasadena's chief assistant city prosecutor sent Harvest Church pastor Chi An a letter threatening fines and up to 1 year in jail for anyone who attends a future service. That's not just the pastor. If you are a member and you attend, you're going to jail or fine. The letter also threatens potential closure of your church, and they will close the church. Now, it sounds like they being mean. I understand. You look at you like, wow, come on, man. All right? But this is after what we read. And the reason why a lot of this is happening is because people are not studying their Bible, okay? And being warned just like Zedekiah was warned. So we can't put the finger on that. We need to put it on defiant, all right? We're under the laws of the land until it conflicts with the law of God. It says here, God, the ruler of all nations. Who then is to be regarded as the ruler of the nations? The Lord God omnipotent. All kings, all rulers, all nations are his, under his rule and his government. And this is plain as day. Even, and I saw it on YouTube the other day, Present Truth, the people who left our churches and to call themselves Seventh-day Adventists, they're even on this rebellious bandwagon, all of them. And I can't believe it because they was former Seventh-day Adventists, all right? And they're saying that if we listen to the government now, when the mark of the beast crisis come, and they all saying this, that we're not gonna be able to be defiant then. In other words, we need to be defiant against them now, so we can be defiant against them when the mark of the beast or the Sunday laws come. All right, and I found this. This is during the chapter on Sunday labor in 6 bio. The short section of religious liberty interest contained a chapter on Sunday law written August 17, 1902, in this Ellen White counsel that rather than to defy civil authorities where there were Sunday laws, Seventh-day Adventists could well use the day in various lines of missionary endeavor. This is during the Sunday worship, Sunday crisis. She's saying we still keep the civil laws. This was to cause considerable discussion in the months. There were those who asserted that the chapter actually represented a major switch in Ellen White's teaching and that it abrogated Sunday sacredness. No, it didn't. The explanation, I will try to answer your question as to what you should do in case Sunday law had been enforced. The light given by me, the Lord, at the time when we were expecting just such a crisis as you seem to be approaching, was that when people were moved by a power from beneath to enforce Sunday observance, Seventh-day Adventists were to show their wisdom by refraining from their ordinary work on that day, devoting it to missionary effort. To divide the Sunday laws will but strengthen in their persecution the religious zealots who are seeking to enforce them. Give them the authorities no occasion to call you lawbreakers. This is in the crisis. One does not receive the mark of the beast because he showed that he realizes the wisdom of keeping the peace by refraining from work that gives offense. She said the Sunday law is going to be given in levels. And one of the early levels is going to be shut down everything on Sunday and don't work. Now, are we to go say we're to obey God rather than man and be defiant? She said, no, go do missionary work. This is in the crisis, okay? Up until they say you cannot worship on Sabbath, we are to listen to the government. We're winding down now. This is like right here. This is a spiritual commercial because I had my sermon finished And then my wife brought this up to me. She said, what did they do during the what did the church do during the pandemic in 1918? And I'm like, good question. All right. By October 7th, with the influenza raging throughout the city, mayors ordered houses of worship closed in the country. 50 million people died, most of them in Europe, but it hit here. What did they do? Number one, the archives show that Roman Catholic Bishop Regis Canavan and the Pittsburgh Council of Churches, a Protestant interdenominational group, agreed to the closures. They complied. Archives in the Jewish Chronicle newspaper indicated that synagogues also apply. So the Catholic, the Protestant, and the Jews all said, yes, we need to close down. No suing, no fighting, no nothing. Number two, churches with architectural rich Gothic sanctuaries turned over its adjoining parishes' houses for a bed hospital to serve patients who had gotten over the worst of the flu but were still regaining strength. The pastors assured members that the sanctuary itself was quarantined and would be safe when the church reopened. Churches agreed to suspend worship services to help save lives. They're in the saving life business. It's like us. If somebody needs food to eat, you don't bring Jesus to them right away. You feed them. And that's what they're saying. They were sick. They opened up their churches, and if you read the article, members came and helped out. Members came and helped them out. They got past the infectious part, so they brought them to the churches so the church can do it. This is what God is talking about, helping people, not being defiant like our churches are doing today. Number three, there was a real Victorian emphasis on domesticity and religion in the home. And there was a lot of devotional material, books, or pamphlets. Victorian, back in the Victorian days, there was a high emphasis on morality, on religion, on home being family life. And they did that. They stayed home. And so forth, that the people used a kind of high piety in the home. All they had is their home altar, as they called it. Families got together at 11 a.m. Sunday morning and had worship in their family units. They were able to respond with kindness and with a sense of duty and responsibility and the common good. And those things can help carry through this time too. They helped each other. And what they did, they went home and they met as a family unit. Okay? And they brought in morals. It's time that you're home now, Sabbath. You can be, teaching your kids what being taught in school. Show them how it's wrong. Okay? Show them what God says about things in their school. That's what they was doing. They took it upon themselves as families to stay home and get closer to God. Not being in defiant and wanting to fight and sue and all the stuff like that. Jeremiah 5:18, and we're closing. We're getting to the end. Babylon, God told Israel they was going into Babylonian captivity. Through Jeremiah, this is what he said. Nevertheless, in those days, says the Lord, I will not make a complete end of you. We talked about it earlier, where God said, if you just go into captivity, I'll take care of you. Okay? Things may be a little bit harder, but you won't. But if you stay in Jerusalem, you're going to live. If you won't live if you stay in Jerusalem. And it will be when you say, why does the Lord our God do all these things to us? Then you shall answer, which is Jeremiah, just as you have forsaken me and served foreign gods in your land, so you will serve aliens in a land that is not yours. And here's the key. Do you not fear me? God is talking to his people. Do you not fear me, says the Lord? Will you not tremble at my presence, who have placed the sands as the bound of the sea by a perpetual decree, that it cannot pass by it? And though its waves toss to and fro, yet they cannot prevail. Though they roar, yet they cannot pass over it. Sometimes in the Bible, in Bible prophecy, water represents people. Or if it's talking about in context of war, it can be talking about people. And it's saying this, no matter how much your government toss to and fro, they roar. They do things that you don't like. Okay? That's what it's saying. It's talking about people here. Fear me. And we go on, it says here, but this people has a defiant and a rebellious heart. They have revolted and departed. They do not say in their hearts, let us now fear the Lord. They want to continue to revolt. And this is what God's saying. No matter what they say, or do, again, it's going to be redundant, if they do not cross that line of infiltrating the law of God, we are to listen, no matter what they say. All right? Now, you can skip that one. So, the Bible says in Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathens. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge." So what is be still and know I'm God? I believe he's talking to the world and to the church. All right? But to the church, he's talking about be still. This is the time, instead of being out there and fighting and screaming and yelling, to reflect. God is showing us through this event that he's coming. And he's saying, and I know he's saying, we're not ready. Stay home, overlook your life, self-assess, see what's going on. Stop going through the motions. Every Sabbath, we come into church, Sabbath school, church, Bible class, AY. Sabbath school, church, prayer meet, AY, and nobody's changing. We're not changing, and we're not ready. And that's what God is trying to tell us. Did that happen before? The Jews rendered outward service to God, all right, as the means of attaining to the national greatness. The Jews looked upon Jerusalem as their heaven, and they were actually jealous lest the Lord should allow mercy to the Gentiles. It's covetousness. As they departed from God, the Jews in a great degree lost sight of the teaching of the ritual service. That service had been instituted by Christ himself. In every part of it was a symbol of him, and it had been full of vitality and spiritual beauty. But the Jews lost the spiritual life from their ceremonies and clung to the dead forms. They trusted to the sacrifices and ordinances themselves instead of resting upon him to whom they pointed. They measured their holiness by the multitude of their ceremonies, while their hearts were filled with pride and hypocrisy. And God is saying the same thing is happening now. They were just going through the motion. There's another quote she said, when Jesus came, they didn't even know what the sanctuary service meant anymore. Just going through the motions for thousands of years, just going through the motions, okay? It's God is telling us, stand still and reassess ourselves right now. Don't get involved in that. I'm in charge of the government. All right, be still and know I'm God. Now it said, I will be exalted among the heathens. I will be exalted in the earth. How is that? Isaiah 29:9-10, I'm going to read verse 10 first to put it into context. It says, let favor be shown to the wicked, yet will he not learn righteousness. In the land of uprightness will he deal unjustly and will not behold the majesty of the Lord. It's saying when things going normal and everything is fine, we're going to be persecuted. The man, whoever we want to call the man, they're going to persecute us. They're going to treat us wickedly. They're going to embezzle, all that stuff like that. But look what verse 9 says. For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Right now, we are a part of judgments that's coming on the earth. Yes, we need to be still and know them God, but God is showing them that he's in charge. That's what he's doing. And right now, a lot of them don't see it. Some of them are seeing it, but eventually, when they start calling for a Sunday law, because they said the people will call for it, they're going to realize they need God. And the only way they're going to realize it, if they realize that they cannot control what's happening. The judgments of God is going to teach them righteousness. That's a profound statement. Okay, also, here goes more standstills. I'm just about done, seriously. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you to this day. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. So when judgment is fallen, again, God told them, stand still. Don't do nothing. Their backs was against the Egyptians, and the sea was in front of them. Jesus just said, stand still. Don't do nothing. Don't try to fight. I'll fight for you. One more example. When the Ammonites and the Edomites and a couple of other things was coming toward Israel, God told them, you will not need to fight in this battle. He said, position yourself. Stand still and see who is with you. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, who is with you, O Judah, Jerusalem. Do not fear or be dismayed. All right? God is saying it's time for him to come out and do a strange work. And he's just telling his people, well, let me read it. That's the next one. Come, my people, Enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be past. All right? Stay in your houses. Don't be defiant. Listen to the government. Keep them off your back. I'm handling this. But these are judgments that are falling on the earth because they have rejected God. And this is not the plagues now. And by the way, Jesus said that this is just the beginning of sorrows. All right? So we got to heed to this. Another one says, be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, for my soul trusts you. And in the shadow of your wings I will make my refuge until these calamities have passed. Lord, again telling you, wait until it passes. Just wait. Okay? These judgments are coming. God's saying, come under my wing, let it happen, and when it's time, if there's time, we'll come back out and do our work. So what should we be doing as Christians? I exhort, therefore, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving thanks be made for all men, for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life. Okay? We lead a quiet and peaceable life, but not being defiant, but by just praying for them. Okay? We can't do nothing. It's the Holy Spirit that has to do it. It's God's got to change them. All right? So we just pray for them. The last two slides and we're done. Let me tell you that the Lord will work in the last work in a manner very much out of the common order of things, and in a way that will be contrary to any human planning. God will use ways and means by which it will be seen that he is taking the reins in his own hands. The workers will be surprised by the simple means that he will use to bring about and perfect his work of judgment. He's taking the reins in his hand. How is he doing this? How is he taking the reins in his own hand? Men of characters, righteous and unrighteous, will stand in their several positions in God's plan. So all this is God's plan. With the characters they have formed, they will act their part in the fulfillment of history. In a crisis, which we are in now, just at the right moment, they will stand in the places they have prepared themselves to fill. Believers and unbelievers will fall into line as witnesses, but unconsciously and unintentionally, they will be fulfilling the purposes of God. It is his plan, and it's the purpose of God, what's going on with the government and the churches, and the church, rather. Okay? And that's all he's saying. We're going to see some strange things. We're going to see some people and all people going to be like, whoa. Okay, but he said, listen, they're not going against my law, listen. We're going to see people doing things, and long as we have choices, we can make choices. For instance, right now, they're trying to tell you to send your kids back to school, but you still have a choice to keep them home. Okay? It's not being enforced. So you still have choices, but generally, we listen to them. So what this is saying is this, and this is the ultimate last slide. You remember when Jesus was walking on water and the disciples, a storm went up. The disciples went on the sea. And it got bad. And Jesus came walking on the water, and Peter saw him. And Peter said, Lord, if that's you, because they thought it was a spirit, if that's you, bid me to come unto you. And Peter got out the boat and started walking toward him. All right? And as long as he kept his eye on Jesus, he did not sink. But when he started looking around, that's when he started sinking. Okay? And this is telling us today that we need to keep our eyes focused on Jesus and stop looking around what everybody is saying. Okay, you not only look with your eyes, you look with your ears. So in other words, it's saying we can't keep our eye on Jesus physically, but we have the Word of God. But when we're out in the streets, we can't read the Word of God because we're driving or walking, so you need to have the Word of God in here. So that when you hear these things coming over YouTube and Instagram and TV, you have to have the discernment to know what's right or wrong. You just can't go and listen to what everybody is saying. Everything has to be tested by the Word of God. If it doesn't go by the Word of God, there is no truth in them. I notice there's people send me texts and listening to people that's not even Christians, that's Buddhists, taking advice from all these people. And I'm like, wow. So what God is saying in closing, brothers and sisters, that he knows what's happening. There's a reason why the story of Ezekiel's wheel is in the Bible. Things may look complicated to us, but the wheel goes around and around because God is controlling the wheel. He knows what's going on inside. He knows the plan of time. He knows the plan of the man's affairs. He knows all that. We may not understand it, but he just asks us as God's people to be faithful and be examples and live a peaceful, quiet life like the Bible tells us. Let's not get caught up in all this stuff out there. Read your Bible, study it first, okay? All right? And then you won't be pulled astray. So let's remember that as we go through the week. Read and study your word. Pray to the Lord. Ask him for guidance. Use the common sense that God gave you and me, what little we have left, okay? But remember this, brothers and sisters. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father in heaven, I'd like to thank you once again for bringing us together on another holy Sabbath day, Lord. We thank you for your wisdom. We thank you for just being God, Lord. The winds of strife is blowing every kind of way, whether it's doctrine or things of the government or the world, Lord. But we're your people. And you said that if we follow the shepherd, wherever he goeth, we won't get lost. Help us, Lord, to cling on to you, to stay in that hiding place with you until you come out, Father, and we come out with you. So be with us, Lord. Help us to be Christians first. Not humans first, Christians first. Let the world know that we don't panic, that we are quiet people. We are people looking for your second coming, Lord. So help us to keep that in mind. Keep our minds right. Help us to read and study every day, Lord. Get closer to you. We have to. If anything, this thing is showing us that your coming is even at the door. The end is not near anymore. The end is here. So be with us today, Lord, as we go through the rest of the Sabbath. We thank you for your word and for leading us, guiding us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. I'd like to thank you, and we'll see you next Sabbath, the same time. Thank you.